All right, hey guys, welcome to the first edition of the ArmCare Helpline, where we're going to be answering your questions, addressing issues you have in the app, really helping you outline process and procedures to get the most out of this technology. And so, for our first conversation, Jordan and I are going to go through the data on a player that had an injury scare, nothing major, but shut him down for a few days, which it's not ideal, but it's definitely worse than, or it's definitely better than, what could have happened. So, Jordan, why don't we start out? Just give us the layout on what happened with this player. And then I really want to dive into the alerts and warnings that the app gives and how we should use those alerts and warnings to make changes to a player's workloads, their starts. Do we need to sit them down for a few days? We'll dive into that afterwards. So, Jordan, why don't you dive into this player's story and give him some details?
Yeah, just to give some context on it, is this is a player who plays for me at the high school, right? And he has been building up. He's been on the right track. Now he is coming off of a surgery, not an arm surgery, his lower extremity where he had an injury. So during that time, and what you're going to see is some really high arm strength numbers, which honestly saved this kid. But with that, when he had his surgery, we focused 100% of our efforts on let's get your arm strong. Let's do everything we can to make you bulletproof as best as possible so we don't have an arm problem in the future. So with that, that's kind of the underlying factor here is the reason this player is fine is because we put so much time into that arm strength to begin with. But I went out of town, had to take my son to do a couple things out in your general neck of the woods, a little bit different area, but I was out in Texas for a whole week. And during that time, I'm leaving my players on their own to take care of their arm care data. And we have an athlete who tests on a Monday, and he's scheduled to throw a live batting practice. And my guidance was if you see blue, follow the plan we have. If you see yellow, only throw a bullpen. That's it. You got to throw 15 pitches in the pen. If you see purple, you do nothing. If you see teal, you do nothing. You retest again the next day, and then you make your adjustments as falls. But we're going to keep it kind of in that little aspect there. So with that, to give the context, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick.
Yep.
Okay, so what we're seeing here is we're building strength over the whole course of January. We're getting into February. We see another good spike in strength, but then we see this big drop off right here. And this is where the problem occurred, right? So if we're looking at that on our graph, and if you're not using your player portal and you have a premium, you need to be using your player portal because it's only going to help you understand your data more. And if we're going in there, where is that day? We're seeing player here had a giant drop off in strength, right? So we're seeing him go from 294 pounds of strength down to 266 pounds of total strength. That is a giant drop off, right? So everything is fired up on there saying this is not good off of your average. Now, with that, we shut him down. We got him back onto the good recovery process. And what we did is I told him, go back to your recovery habits course. Go freaking watch that thing and start paying attention. Then what we saw is he actually started bouncing back, and we're getting his ERIR ratio where we have him in those good ranges back into those better ranges again. So what ended up happening with this athlete here, where he dropped down from 150 to 127 on his arm score, from 294 to 266 on his total strength, is he was not recovered. But with that, he felt great. So when somebody feels great, that's awesome. It doesn't really matter though, right? Feel versus real. So he texts me it's probably about 9 p.m. and he goes, Jordan, my arm is hurting really bad. I can't wash my hair. It hurts to brush my teeth. I go, what did you do? And he goes, well, all my numbers were orange and purple, but I felt really good. So I decided I was going to throw my 3-inning sim game, and I should have stopped after inning 1 when my arm started hurting. But I felt really good going into the game, into the sim game. And I almost said the name. I'm not going to say the name. Said, player, what was the instructions that I gave you? And he said, if I see orange, I'm only supposed to throw a bullpen. If I see purple anywhere, I'm not supposed to throw at all. I go, was there purple? Yes. Why did you throw? I felt good. I said, I don't care how you felt. Follow the data. So he went and saw sports orthopedic, sports med doctor. Yeah. And I should know that since I have a degree in those things. But he went and saw his neighbor was a sports med doctor person thingy. and went through. They wanted him slinged. Everything checked out fine, no damage. But again, thankfully, there's not too many athletes that have on a bad day 260 pounds of arm strength. So strength is this player's friend. Even though he is exhibiting pain in different ways, he was able to bounce back. We got him on the recovery habits protocols. We got him on all the things to get the arm back to where it was. And now we're back to where we need to be on that strength. We got a rebalanced shoulder. It took about a week, roughly, but now he's back to feeling good. He's like, yeah, I'm not in pain anymore. He's hitting back to his normal velo points. He's a young athlete. He's a sophomore in high school. So you have to pay attention to the data, because just because you feel good does not mean you're ready to go. When we looked down on his adjusted pitch counts for the day, it said no pitching, don't freaking throw. It couldn't have been more clear that he should not have thrown, but he said, I'm going to do it because I feel good. This is where we want to pay attention to how those muscles are bouncing back. We've said it a million times. Now we're going to say it 1,000,001 today, that fatigue is the number one cause of injury. You have a 36 times higher likelihood of injury on the day you're fatigued. Now that will cause you to change your biomechanics, which changes how you're going to absorb force, how you're going to transfer force. It's going to change how you're fatiguing. And then with that, real quick, I just want to pull this up really quick on here. Let me share my screen one more time. I want to make sure I don't show this player's name. But if we're going to pull up his fatigue data and we're going to look at this, we see that same one where he's dropping on his strength, right? So we go there. Look how much strength he lost on these last 2 days. So
Yeah.
even with this one, we dropped his pitch volumes down as what he was supposed to do. And he threw freaking more. I told him
Yeah.
not to, right? So he did everything he shouldn't have done. And he lost over 27% strength. And we've repeated him back here. And now we got back into good ranges right at the bare minimum of what we're looking to lose, right? So you need to pay attention to your data. So for him, it was do not throw, right? We were at 20, we were good. We went to 40, a little bit too much. So he was only supposed to throw 35, but
Hmm.
he decided to throw 60 because everybody else was throwing 60. So again, we don't want to follow the herd. We want to listen to what the app's telling us to do.
Yeah. Now, so some people are like, "Hey, how did I get that really cool view that you're showing me?" I think a lot of players don't even realize that they can use that portal link on the ArmCare webpage to get that really clean spreadsheet view of all of their data. The app is a really useful tool when you're out the field. You can, dive in through your numbers to see where you're at right now. But when you're looking back and analyzing things, going into the portal gives you that nice, clean, you know, 10,000-foot view of what your numbers are looking like over time. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's really important that players get comfortable with looking at where are they at, and after heavy workloads, where do those strike numbers change? So use that portal. I think it's a really awesome view. So
Yeah, you can filter by date. You can go back and look at a ton of stuff on there. The portal is a very underutilized feature.
yeah. Yeah. So if you didn't know, now you know. You can go to armcare.com. You'll see a link there in the header for portal. You'll want to use this on a desktop computer. Just you need that big screen to see all the data and the graphs. But get used to regularly going back and looking at your data through that portal view. Now we got kind of granular into this use case scenario. Now let's talk more in general. So let's say we have a player. We get out of the field, they do their strength test, and holy crap, they just flagged a medical alert. So that green light up, is showing now. Let's walk through the first step. And the first thing I would recommend is don't freak out. Like it could just be a bad test. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Jordan, I know you're big on just getting that player warmed up. A lot of guys just grab the sensor, go do their test, and they've just been kind of going through the paces on their warm up, and they haven't really done the work to get everything firing. Any other suggestions about that first step?
Yeah, in my experience, especially with the high school age range. And before I get into that, let me preface this with if you, and I'm going to say it again, if you're doing the MLB recovery habits course, it's almost impossible to not be recovered on a 7 day rotation. 5 day rotation, a little different, almost impossible to not be recovered on a 7 day rotation, especially if you're a high school or a college athlete. I
Hmm.
mean, you know how it was when you're in college, you could eat cotton balls and digest it into energy.
Yeah.
So if you have actual good nutrition and everything that you're taking care of, you should be bounced back to not just a full gas tank, but your gas tank should keep getting bigger every single week. Realistically, the only times I've run into problems with an amateur athlete where they test and they're not back. As a starting pitcher, relievers are different. As they test and they're not back to full strength and they're triggering warnings, I just simply ask them, "What did you do for your warm up?" They go, "I did a couple of these, did this, and then I did my test." And I go, "Well, don't do that. That's stupid. Don't be stupid." And we were just out at Rotational Athlete Center in Arizona doing one of our accelerators about a month and a half ago. And above their urinal, they had a picture of Michael Scott from The Office or Dwight Schrute from The Office. And it says, "I just ask, would a stupid person do this? If the answer is yes, then I don't do that." Not warming up is what a stupid person would do. No,
Classic.
right? So just don't do
Classic
that.
line.
Listen to Dwight Schrute. I may have screwed it up, but
No, it's perfect.
simply don't do what stupid people do. So
Mhm.
again, I can't hammer it enough. Not warming up is what a stupid person would do. And anyone who's like, "Well, I've never seen cheetahs warm up," you're also not on four legs and not wandering around the savannah all day. You probably
Mhm.
were sitting on the bench, drinking Gatorade, like chatting with somebody, and then you're not a cheetah when it comes down. We are different animals when it comes down to it. So I can't emphasize that enough. But then once we get them loose, we retest. All of a sudden, they're back to their normal ranges, right? And if you are seeing that specifically, the reason we need to do more testing is if you're testing. Now, I have my guys testing 3 to 4 times a week. Right now, with the high school group, I'm meeting with those guys 3 times a week. With the guys who I do my private sessions with, those
Mhm.
guys, like they're texting me stuff every day. They're testing every day. I need to know where they're at. With my high school guys, any day they're throwing and they have access to the sensor, they're going to send me their data. I need to know where they're at so we can make adjustments. Because my goal, I will sacrifice a little practice time, especially this time of year. It is February 20th. Opening day for most high schools is in a week, right? 2 weeks for the colder weather states. So
Mhm.
for me right now, I will sacrifice practice time to get the game reps. I need that player ready for the game. I
Yeah.
will miss out on PFPs. I'm more worried about you striking guys out, right? We're going to put that as the main goal. So adjust on your bullpen day, adjust on your regular throw day, adjust on your light throw day. Maybe you need a no throw day here and there between those outings to make sure we're wave loading. And again, we have a whole course on this on data led adjustments. Dig into those courses. They are there for people to maximize, no pun intended, maximize their arm care data, right? We have a course called Maximize Arm Care. So no pun intended, but we are there to maximize that data to make sure you're ready to go day 5, day 7 if you're a reliever, every third day, whatever that situation may be, so you can go to post on a full gas tank and not guess. And again, this is an example. We use the player. I felt good. Well, now if you would have told coach you feel good, but you don't have that data, you throw and you blow out, there goes 18 to 24 months for an amateur. Most
Yeah.
likely not going to be playing again, right? So you need to make sure you're hammering this stuff out and taking it extreme. Like, it has to be doom and gloom when you're looking at this stuff. Adjustments early in the week, so later in the week you can go to post.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to get into some of those, acute adjustments, like when we see a watch or a warning, how do we need to change a bullpen or whatever we're doing that day? But yeah, just going through the workflow. Kid test shows up with a bad score. First thing is don't freak out. Get the guy warmed up better, have him go through another set of activation with the bands, slow down that tempo, really get things firing, do that primer test. So just redoing that warm up process could get those numbers up. Now we'll mention there's a chance there was a bad reading. At the very start of the exam, you have to calibrate that sensor. Something could happen with the calibration that threw that off. So just going through the warm up process again, another 10-minute warm up, redo the test. If numbers are still bad, we're going to dive into the next steps after that. And also, I want a disclaimer here. We're talking about guys who are not in pain. They're not coming in like, "Hey man, coach, my arm hurts." We're talking about guys who are like, "Oh man, I feel good," but then we're looking at their data and it's suggesting maybe they're not good. And we're really focused on that situation right
Mm-hmm.
now.
They're
So
not throwing through pain.
yeah, exactly. That's one of our key principles. We're not throwing through pain. We're talking about the kid whose arm, he says he feels good, but the numbers are showing that it doesn't. He's not good. So getting into okay, now we get some warnings. If we see a big drop in strength, specifically if we're seeing those medical alerts, first of all, okay, the science, like why are numbers dropping? And if we're seeing really big drops in strength, the first concern would be this kid is injured. Like he actively has an acute strain that is causing some inhibition around that joint, and he's not able to push maximally because the brain is protecting that injury. So it could be Subtle, it could be very small, but there is some tissue damage there. And again, we're getting some inhibition. The brain is very good about protecting itself from further injury. So muscles aren't firing as strongly around the joint, so we're not going to be able to press as hard. So that's our very first concern: is this player is actually actively injured right now, and we need to now adjust things so they don't further that injury, don't progress that injury. A very minor strain is 3 to 5 days off, versus a major strain could be weeks, if not months off. So if you're seeing those medical alerts, I would say that's definitely an indication that we need to shut this guy down for at least 2 days and see, do those numbers come back up, and we can then return back to our regular workloads. Jordan, anything
Also,
else to add to
quick,
that?
I've never seen a guy in a medical that did not have arm pain.
Mm,
So that's also a key point there. Is there's usually pain if there's pain in testing, you want to start digging into that as well, and those usually accompany a medical.
okay, perfect. Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about maybe some of the other alerts that we'll see, the watches or the warnings that maybe aren't indicating there's some sort of tissue damage, but the player's just fatigued. And it's really hard to tease out, why is this player fatigued? Of course, it could be workloads where, they've just had heavy workloads. They're tired. Maybe they didn't get good rest, and they're not able to exert that maximal force that they typically can. How do we start adjusting fatigue? Maybe we're not shutting the guy down, but what are you typically doing when you see a guy with a watch or maybe even a warning
Mhm.
that says,
Yeah.
"Hey, I don't
So
hurt"?
yeah, if I'm seeing a guy with a watch and we'll just say that it's a game day, right? Number one, if he's my starting pitcher, I always test two options, and everybody knows that. And my athletes know, if you're pitching for me on my staff and I have this data and you're not recovered, I will push you. And I'm going to throw the arm that's going to be in good, bad, or indifferent at the high school level. And again, I asked, like, we were out at a clinic in Ohio too with one of our partners, and I asked coaches there. They were high school coaches and said, "Who won your guys' state championship last year?" And like, none of the players knew.
Mhm.
And I know this might sound horrendous, but it's because it's not that important. And I sat in a room with, again, in our Arizona accelerator, where we had roughly 60 MLB affiliated coaches, scouts, front office, ATs, PTs, CSCSs. They were all there. And I said, "Who here has been in a draft room?" Over 70% of the room raised their hand. I go, "How many people have ever said, we're drafting this guy because his team played so deep into the postseason?" They're like, no hand went up, right? Nobody's that worried about it. They're worried about what that athlete's doing. And on my end, I'm going to look at through the lens of, I'm going to put the athlete into a position for success. I want them to pitch at their max capacity, because if someone is there to watch them, I would rather push them a day and pitch them on a full gas tank than have them throw at 80% to be seen by the school that's there to see them.
Mhm.
And I'll wear the burden of that. Why isn't he throwing today? Because I didn't want. I'll be the jerk. It's not the player's fault. It's my fault. That they can hate me. I don't care. I'm
Yeah.
pushing it today. I'm not going to lose sleep over it when it comes down to it, because that athlete's going to pitch better if I give him that rest that he's going to need. And if he is good to go, then we're just going to go to post. And now, if it's getting to that point where we can't make the adjustment, he's the last guy on the staff there for that starting rotation, and it's a Friday in the high school sense, right? We're not playing on the weekends, and he's triggering that warning. I'm going to look right at that adjusted daily pitch count max. I will
Mhm.
not exceed that. Should not be exceeded. So even if it says, 45, and that athlete says he's feeling great and it's 38 pitches, I'm sorry, man, you're going 45. Like, I may even keep you below that 45. I will not exceed that 45, and then we're going to have to piece it together as best we can. We may have to throw some guys that aren't ready from a not a physiological standpoint, but from a skill standpoint, and they're going to have to go learn quick, right?
Mhm.
So, and again, I look at everything from a development standpoint. Is just because I'm not going to be able to roll out my horse on that day. And again, if you're doing the MLB recovery habits course, it's almost impossible to not be bounced back on a 7 day. I don't throw guys on short rest personally. I don't throw guys on a 5 day unless they're at least 18 years old. I don't throw guys back to back days. I've not done that one time now in, this will be my fourth year coaching high school baseball. I've not thrown a guy back to back. Not done it yet. I don't plan on doing it. I keep enough guys throwing. I mean, shoot, I might throw a second baseman and everyone throws bullpens because everyone's going to contribute to spread out the load because I'd rather keep a guy healthy than win a ball game personally. And anyone who's known me, I like winning, but I also like to not have kids get surgery.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully, I think I answered it. I don't know.
No, absolutely, absolutely. It's there's now a judgment call to be made.
Mhm.
What's at stake? Are we
Yeah,
talking about?
like, to be realistic, the only place I've ever coached that I
Mhm,
got a bonus based on how far I went was in college summer leagues. That
mm,
was the only place I've coached. I've coached in a couple different leagues, and I was incentivized to go deeper. That this was our base pay. Postseason, I get extra money. If I make the second round, I get extra money. If we get to the championship, I get extra money. If we win the championship, I get extra money. When you're a broke college coach, that sounds pretty appealing, right?
yeah,
But in high school, I've never run into a high school coach. It's like, yeah, if we win, I get a 15% bonus on my $1,000 stipend. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you're
for
not
sure.
making enough money to be like, I have to make this decision to put this player at risk, and again, go into our data led adjustments. It has the should you pitch on short rest? Like, should you be doing this? Should you be doing that? It's a flow chart that's just easy to follow. It's all right there. It's almost too simple to be true, but it works.
Yeah, for sure. So, just wrapping this conversation up, we get our guys warmed up. They go through the test. If it's flagging a bad score, don't freak out. Get them warmed up even more, and have them do another test. Make sure that that score is accurate. If that if that score is consistently bad, we need to consider the level. And as Jordan mentioned, usually if it's flagging medical, this guy's reporting some arm pain. So that's an indication to shut him down. But if they're saying, "Yeah, my arm feels good, I'm good to go," just consider that there may be some underlying tissue injury that we don't want to progress any further. So better safe than sorry in those conditions. Shut the guy down at least for 2 days. Get him through some active recovery work and see if that strength number comes back up. For just more subtle drops, we now have to make some judgment calls. Take a look at their workloads. What have they done over the past few days? Maybe dig into their recovery habits a bit. Are they, in the middle of finals week and they're, taking a bunch of tests, things like that. Now we have to really start piecing out like, why is this guy
Here's a
scoring
fun one
down?
for you.
Yeah.
I had a guy on Friday, the day that I was out of town. He
Hmm.
did his fresh exam. Everything was flagged as like bad, and so you're not throwing today. Just take it off. You can take BP. You can hit. That's the message that I gave him. I was obviously out of town, so he did nothing. On Monday, I get a text and he goes, "I haven't been to school. I haven't been anything. I've got the worst flu I've had in a long time."
Mm,
And this is not the first time I've even had other coaches reach out and go, "Hey, the ArmCare sensor predicted the flu." If you start seeing like random huge drops, get that kid, get him away from your team. Like,
yeah.
he's if he's always like steady Eddie, and then there's a big drop, get him away from everyone. Send him home because he's probably sick, and he's gonna give everyone some kind of weird gombo, right? Get him out of there, have him recover, and then bring him back in a day or two and make sure he's good.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we're picking up on some things that aren't even baseball related, as Jordan's mentioning. He could be sick. He could, who knows what's going on here. But that's where things get challenging is we start having to tease out why are we seeing these subtle drops in strength and what do we need to do about it. But I appreciate Jordan's approach a lot is, wins and losses, they're not meaningless. They're important. It's a reason we play the game. But development, especially at the younger ages, should supersede that win at all cost mentality. So keep that in mind as you watch these numbers and keep in mind that we're working to develop these players to meet their goals on the field, whether it's make it to the next level or just have success. Guys who are fresh and recovered are going to have much more success than guys who are getting pushed past their capacity. So hopefully that first edition of the helpline was helpful. We'll be back for more tips and tricks on using that ArmCare app and getting the most out of it. All right. So we'll see you next time.